For nearly 2,000 years, billions of people have imagined the face of Jesus. But here's the problem. We don't actually know what Jesus looked like. Jesus is one of the most recognizable people in human history. But strangely, we don't actually know what he looked like. The Gospels tell us about his teachings, his actions, and his final days. But they never give us a detailed description of his face. There is no confirmed portrait of Jesus from his lifetime. So how did the familiar face of Jesus become known around the world? To answer that, we have to go back to the earliest centuries after his death. Jesus was a Jewish man who lived in first century Galilee, a region of the ancient Roman world. He grew up among people whose appearance, clothing, and customs were shaped by the culture of the time. So to understand what Jesus may have looked like, we first need to understand the people he came from. Archaeology and ancient evidence give us clues about the men of this region. They were generally darker-haired and darker-eyed, and they lived in a hot, sun-filled Mediterranean climate. Jesus would also have dressed like an ordinary Jewish man of his time. The familiar image we've inherited may therefore be very different from the man who actually walked through Galilee. So what about Jesus' hair and beard? The familiar paintings often show him with long, flowing hair. But that image comes from much later artistic traditions, not from a description written during Jesus' lifetime. To understand what he may actually have looked like, we need to look at the hairstyles and clothing of Jewish men in the first century. Ancient evidence suggests that men in this region generally wore their hair relatively short and practical, often with a beard. Their clothing was simple, a tunic, an outer cloak, and sandals, suited to the hot Mediterranean climate. Jesus would most likely have looked like an ordinary Jewish man of his time, not the pale, long-haired figure seen in many later paintings. If we want to get closer to the real appearance of Jesus, archaeology gives us another important clue. We don't have Jesus' skeleton, but archaeologists have discovered remains from men who lived in the same region and roughly the same period. These remains can tell us about the people Jesus would have lived among. Researchers can study ancient skulls, bones, and burial remains to understand things like average height, build, and facial structure. Combined with ancient art, clothing, and historical evidence, these clues help create a more realistic picture of a first-century Jewish man. It isn't a portrait of Jesus, but it brings us closer to the world he actually lived in. For centuries, artists have tried to put a face to Jesus, but the earliest Christian images didn't always show him the way we recognize him today. Some ancient artworks portray Jesus with shorter hair, a beard, and very different features from the familiar European paintings. Over time, artists began portraying Jesus according to the people and cultures around them. In Europe, he increasingly appeared with long brown hair, lighter skin, and familiar Western features. These paintings became incredibly influential, but they were created centuries after Jesus lived. So the face millions of people recognize today may tell us more about the artist who painted him than the man himself. There is one ancient-looking image that has fascinated people for centuries. It is known as the Shroud of Turin, a piece of linen bearing the faint image of a bearded man. Some believe it could be connected to Jesus, but its true history remains deeply disputed. The image appears to show a man with long hair, a beard, and injuries consistent with crucifixion. But scientific testing has produced conflicting interpretations, and there is no definitive proof that the shroud belonged to Jesus. So the shroud cannot give us a confirmed portrait of Jesus, but it remains one of the most fascinating clues in the search for his real appearance. When historians put all these clues together, a very different picture begins to emerge. Jesus was a Jewish man from Galilee, living in the first century. The evidence points toward dark hair, dark eyes, a beard, and a complexion suited to the Mediterranean climate. He was also likely dressed simply, like other working men of his time. His appearance probably wasn't remarkable enough to make him instantly recognizable in a crowd. And that may explain one of the most interesting details in the gospel accounts. Judas had to identify Jesus to the authorities with a kiss. Perhaps Jesus simply looked like an ordinary man among the people around him. If historians have reason to believe Jesus may have looked very different, why do billions of people recognize the same familiar face? The answer lies largely in art and tradition. As Christianity spread across the world, artists naturally began portraying Jesus in ways that people in their own cultures could recognize. Over centuries, these images were copied, refined, and passed from one generation to the next. Eventually, the long-haired, bearded Jesus became so familiar that the image itself began to feel like historical fact. But familiarity isn't the same as evidence. The face we know may be one of history's most influential artistic creations, rather than a true portrait of the man himself. After examining the evidence, we can separate what we know from what we simply assume. We know Jesus was a Jewish man from first-century Galilee. We have good reason to believe he had dark hair, dark eyes, a beard, and a complexion typical of the region. But beyond that, the evidence becomes much less certain. We don't know his exact height. We don't know the precise shape of his face, and we don't have a verified portrait created during his lifetime. Even the Shroud of Turin cannot give us a definitive answer. The evidence can bring us closer to Jesus, but it cannot give us his exact face. After everything we've uncovered, we can get closer to the historical Jesus. We can imagine a Jewish man from first-century Galilee with dark hair, dark eyes, a beard, and the complexion of someone who lived beneath the Mediterranean sun. But there is one thing history cannot give us: his exact face. For nearly 2,000 years, people have searched for the face of Jesus. Through paintings, archaeology, ancient traditions, and even the Shroud of Turin. But no image can prove exactly what he looked like. The face may be lost to history, but the story of the man behind it has survived. And perhaps in the end, that is the greatest mystery of all. For nearly 2,000 years, people have searched for the face of Jesus. We may never know exactly what he looked like, but perhaps that's what makes the mystery so powerful. The paintings may change, the theories may change, and new discoveries may continue to challenge what we think we know. But the question remains: what did Jesus really look like? Maybe history has hidden the answer forever. Thank you for watching. Until next time, keep questioning history.